Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning. And today, we've definitely got a pretty interesting combination out here to try out and see what it can do. We've tested this setup with kind of these shells before, but in different shot sizes with some very interesting results. And I think this combination might just be kind of the ticket when it comes to turkey hunting with this kind of a setup, if you wanted to use a lead shell. So as for those shells that I've got here today, I brought out some of these, the Winchester Longbeard XR 12 gauge shells. These are the 3-inch 1 7/8 ounce payload of number 5 shot, moving about 1,050 feet per second. So we know that these are a good performing shell on their own, but what can they actually do through today's kind of old school setup? And speaking of that setup, I brought out this guy. This is my old Mossberg 500A, but it has a 30-inch fixed full choke barrel on it. And I did measure the actual choke constriction of this barrel, and it comes out to be roughly 695 constriction. So definitely not overly tight, but very much so right in that typical full choke type of range. So definitely an old school setup that has shown us some surprisingly decent and very usable turkey patterns. So what can it do with the Longbeard 5s today? That's going to be the question. And like I mentioned a little bit ago, we have tested that setup with both the Longbeard 4s and the Longbeard 6s. And both gave us very usable patterns, but I think the 5s might be kind of the best of both worlds, where we have the actual pellet count over the 4s, but we might have a little bit tighter of an overall pattern than we did in the 6s. So we'll see what this combo can do. But as for the test today, everything is set up the same as usual. The turkey paper's at 40 yards, and I've got the chronograph so we can get our velocity out of the shell. So let's get you guys to view this target and take the shot and just see what the Longbeard 5s can do through this old 30-inch fixed full choke Mossberg. Okay, so that shell gave us 1,025 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1,050, so we are just a little bit under that, which surprises me because typically when we test these 1,050 claim Longbeard shells, they're typically a little higher than what the box says. But this is a 30-inch barrel, and I have seen before where once you hit a certain barrel length, you don't really gain any more velocity, and you can actually start losing just a little bit. So that may very well have played into this velocity number today. Either way, we are not far off the box claim, so I think it's pretty realistic considering what they're saying we should see. But what kind of a pattern did we actually get down there at 40 yards? Let's go check it out and see what it gave us. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and this is what we got. And very clearly, we have a dead turkey here all day long. Now, I do think our pattern was just a touch off to the right, which I think was actually me, more so than the combination actually just shooting to the right. But as you can see here, this is a beautiful looking pattern, especially considering that's a 40 or 45-year-old fixed full choke. That is a very nice looking pattern, all things considered here. That would be a very solid turkey pattern for a modern setup as well. I really like the way that looks. Although we don't have a baseball tight core, I'd say the middle, 15 inches or so of that pattern is all beautifully evenly spread. There's no big gaps and voids or anything like that in there. On the outskirt edges, we definitely give ourselves a little bit of leeway to work with without just being blown all over the place. And for flyers, there might be a couple of them like down there at the bottom and maybe a couple of these over off the left. But this is a lead turkey shell in a 40-year-old setup. I don't mind having a couple flyers with that kind of a pattern. I really like the way that looks. Sure, it might not be the absolute tightest Longbeard number 5 pattern we've ever seen, but it's far from the worst as well. But that is a very usable, very solid turkey pattern that I would not be scared in the slightest to take out on a turkey hunt, that's for sure. So I don't really know what else to say about that. I think it kind of speaks for itself. That just goes to show that even if you have an older, basic, fixed choke setup, if you test a few good performing turkey shells out of it, you can absolutely still have a very solid turkey setup on your hands. I wouldn't be scared to hunt with that combination in the slightest, and clearly it would still take a bird just as good as any $2,000 shotgun with the most expensive TSS shell you got. That's clearly good enough for 40 yards, and you could easily push that to 50 and still have a very usable turkey pattern as well. So all in all, I am very pleased with that performance, and honestly, it's a little better than what I kind of expected it to be. I kind of figured the 5s were probably going to be the best of both worlds with the pellet count over the 4s versus the pattern density compared to the 6s, and I think I was kind of right here today. say, because clearly that is probably about as good as you're going to get for a lead turkey shell out of that old school of a setup. So no complaints from me at all here today. At this point, I think I'm just kind of rambling when this pattern speaks for itself, but definitely nothing short of a very solid usable turkey pattern all day long here. I definitely like what I'm seeing out of that setup, that's for sure. Okay, and here's the wad out of that shell, and as you can see, very typical longbeard wad. Definitely nothing fancy to see. It looks very much the same as they always do. There's nothing stuck down in there. There's no pinholes. There's no rips or tears. It obviously didn't snag on anything since that's a fixed full choke barrel. So I definitely think it did pretty well, perfect, and as good as it could possibly do for today's pattern. Definitely no complaints here, that's for sure. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that pattern right there? Once again, I think it can kind of speak for itself. That is nothing short of a very impressive turkey pattern for what this setup is. I was expecting to see a usable pattern, but to get a pattern that's as good looking as that, definitely very impressive. I mean, we've seen patterns just like that out of a much more expensive modern setup and modern choke combination. So I'd say with that shell, that 40-plus-year-old Mossberg is absolutely capable of being a turkey hunting setup all day long. So I am really liking what I'm seeing out of that. I wouldn't be scared to hunt with that any day of the week. But as always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Is that about what you were expecting to see? Or were you a little surprised one way or the other? Do you have an old Mossberg with a fixed full choke barrel? And have you tried some longbeard shells through it? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? And would you hunt with that kind of a pattern? Or would you hunt with that old school kind of setup? It can clearly still get the job done. So let me know your thoughts about it all down below. At the end of the day here, I don't think we can argue with that one bit. I think that's about as good as it gets for a lead turkey shell through that old school setup. So definitely no complaints from me, that's for sure. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys. So I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description down below if you're interested in it. But I'm going to get back to it. So I'll see y'all in the next one.